Hi, my name is Ryan Ording. I was an RU student at Texas A&M this summer, and my project was the fabrication of nanocomposite membranes for water filtration. I worked with TAMU-REU, who was my graduate mentor, and Dr. Hong Liang, who was my principal investigator. So what's the big idea? Well, there is a huge issue facing wastewater treatment plants, and that is the removal of heavy metal ions from wastewater. Heavy metals include things like manganese, lead, copper, chromium, cadmium, and a few others, and they all pose very significant risks to human health, environmental health, and animal health. The existing methods that wastewater treatment plants have to remove these out of the water are usually extremely expensive or often unreliable, and they don't last very long. They build up and then you can't reuse them. So the EPA does set limits on maximum concentration level for drinking water, but even though that the actual concentrations may be within those limits, heavy metals can still pose a severe health risks, and this was demonstrated by the University of El Paso, Texas in 2019. What's the potential solution, you might ask? Well, plastic. Plastic is super cheap, it's economically friendly, and our process is ecologically friendly as well, which is uncommon for plastics. These wastewater treatment plants work with a liquid called activated sludge, and activated sludge is a super thick, viscous liquid, which is a microcosm of microorganisms uh, that is in a loose clump suspended by stirring in the wastewater. And filters can get clogged up pretty easily with this sludge. So these filters are porous, so they allow the water through, preventing the activated sludge from going through. And we also suspend a nanoparticle inside of them that acts as a heavy metal attractor. So as the water flows through, these heavy metals are pulled out by the filter. And then once this filter is chock full of those heavy metal ions, we can either take it out and reuse it, or take it out and clean out the heavy metals, and then reuse the plastic somewhere else in some other process. Great. We're producing membranes, no problem, maybe two, three a day. We could definitely ramp that up. But we didn't really have a way to quantifiably prove how good they were. So we needed a pumping system. And unfortunately, the budget didn't really allow for an expensive pumping system. So I had to come up and propose ideas for one that could be built. So I proposed something called a peristaltic pump. They are a type of positive displacement pump. They work by having these two rollers. You can see here, these are two spring rollers, one, two. They push this flexible tubing up against that inner wall, and as it compresses, it draws liquid up, and then this roller pushes the liquid out. And then that process just repeats and repeats. They are super versatile. They are chemically compatible because the only part of the pump that the liquid that is touching is the tubing itself, and these pumps are often designed so that that tubing can be replaced. So you can use things like Hypalon, nitrile, PVC, polyurethane, natural rubber, silicone, and all of these things work differently with whatever you're pumping. And they're pretty easy to maintain because there is no exposed part of the pump that is actually touching the potentially caustic liquid that you're working with. They can be expensive, unfortunately. Like I said, the budget didn't allow for one, so I had to build one, which we'll see in the next slide. And they're not for smooth flow applications. These operate on a dial, so one rotation is one spurt of liquid. And so I went ahead and built a peristaltic pump. Never having built a pump like this in my life, for that matter, any kind of pump, I wasn't exactly sure how to approach this problem. Fortunately, there was a fantastic online tutorial that I found by the great Scott Lab, and he even went so far as to provide STLs for the case. So here's on the left, you can see this is a 3D model of the housing. This is the model that we actually used to print. We printed on a Formlabs 2 resin printer with clear resin. You can see the assembled motor on the right. We used a polyurethane tubing inside, pretty flexible, super flexible, actually. The original design actually had plastic rollers, so we decided to replace those with metal ball bearings, which seem to be a little bit more durable, so hopefully this will last a few years. The total cost for this project came out to just over $50, which fit right in our budget, so that was great. We used a NEMA 17 stepper motor because we really wanted fine control over how this pump would be pumping. So each step is controlled by a micro Arduino Micro. And I used the associated stepper motor driver and that resin printed case. It was pretty easy to build, ran into a couple snags with the electronics, but I got it sorted out. So this is the actual circuit diagram that I used to set up the motor. We have an Arduino Nano on the left, and on the far right, in the middle, we have the stepper motor driver, and on the far right, I actually have the potentiometer. I used an analog potentiometer, so just a dial, and I hooked that up as an input, and that's how I actually controlled the speed of the stepper motor. It was a little bit unfortunate I decided to go analog because there aren't precise positions to measure from, but I do have plans for making this a digital potentiometer, accepting a digital input, so we can specify using a GUI on a computer how fast the motor's moving. To test how fast the pump could actually pump, I set up two 1-liter beakers side by side, and I filled the one on the right up with DI water, and I put the inlet tube into that one, and then I put the outlet tube into the left one, which is where the water shoots out from, of course. And then I actually raised the motor to the height of the beakers, so the pump didn't have to work extra hard against gravity comparatively. I set the analog dial to low, medium, and then high. I timed each and then scaled it up to an hour. I did each position 4 times over to try and get consistent results or an average. Fortunately, they were pretty consistent. So, after measuring these flow rates, at low, I got a measured flow rate of 70 milliliters per minute. At the medium setting, I got 125 milliliters per minute. And at the high setting, I got about 333. It was like 333.333 repeating milliliters per minute. And then I calculated how many milliliters I could get at each step. And the answer was just about 1.33. After noticing how handy I was, apparently in the lab, another graduate student asked me if I could help him with another project, and that he wanted to design a laser engraver. So he needed something to damage a surface very precisely. Laser-induced damage is a really common method for damaging a surface. You can easily break through like an oxide layer without mechanically removing it and damaging the sample, the potentially very thin sample. The laser damage threshold is what you measure how much damage you're causing, and it's the limit at which a material will be damaged by a laser given fluence, which is energy per area, intensity, power per area, and wavelength. The one you see on the right is a 3.5 watt laser, and it pretty much burns anything at above 50% power and at a duty cycle of 150 hertz. This is the actual circuit that we used for the laser. The laser itself needed to be easy to move, so the only thing that was difficult is finding a wall outlet. You could carry it in one hand if you really wanted to. During testing, I accidentally burned straight through the cardboard, and I actually burned the desk that I was working at, so I was pretty happy with the power output, and it definitely was controllable. So we have a kill switch built directly from the power, so we can cut power off to the whole system. Then we have an on-off switch for the actual laser itself, and the laser end is powered by a 12-volt power supply, and that 12-volt power supply also powers a PWM controller, which is how we actually control the frequency or the power and the duty cycle of the laser. It really was a fantastic summer. I learned a lot. I gained a lot of background knowledge into the lab. I was able to design an economically viable peristaltic pump. I designed a pump that this thing had variable flux rate, which is great, and the pump was powerful enough to push water through the membranes. I successfully made those membranes as well. I developed this laser engraving system with that kill switch and a variable intensity laser system. All really big things that I'm proud of and proud to put my name on. Thank you so much to the REU program team, Miss Tandalin, Nolan Clark, and special thanks to Ajinkia and Dr. Hong for bringing me into the lab and teaching me so much this summer. Thank you.